Welcome to the LeaderCast podcast, a weekly deep dive into the stories that transformed our guests into leaders worth following. I'm your host, Joe Boyd. If you've been enjoying the podcast, thank you so much for being a listener. One simple thing you can do to help us out is give a review wherever you listen. Today's guest is Dr. Radhika Dirks. She is the CEO of XLabs, which is a moonshot factory using artificial intelligence to solve the world's biggest problems. She is in high demand in year 2023. We are super excited that she was part of our program at Human Intelligence, and you're gonna love this episode. There's a lot to learn about artificial intelligence and the person behind it. You're gonna love meeting Radhika. Dr. Radhika Dirks, welcome to the LeaderCast podcast. It has been my pleasure to get to know you a little bit over the last couple of weeks. Thanks for speaking at our event. And then we got to have a call this week as well. So excited to have you on. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
Yeah. You're obviously a busy person these days. You probably always have been, but I think the world is suddenly very interested in your line of work. So I want to go back and talk about little Radhika and what you're into and what kind of person you were as a kid. But before that, can you just let the world know like what you're into these days and what your sort of job is, for lack of a better way to say it?
Absolutely. So I'm into AI. I've been into artificial intelligence for almost a decade now. And I've been in sort of the larger computing and tech world. It feels like all my life.
Yeah.
But really, the past 20 to 30 years, I did my PhD in quantum computing. One thing led to another, became an entrepreneur in the AI world. So these days, I guess the last 5 or so years, I've been the CEO and founder of a moonshot factory called XLabs. We are the only independent moonshot factory, perhaps the only other one outside of Google X. And from there, we've spun out a few projects, and the most successful of it is Ribo AI, where we use AI to find cures for 11 different types of cancers.
Wow. Which is awesome. I think intuitively, I sort of know what a moonshot project is, but could you just explain what that phrase means for folks?
Absolutely. It's a really interesting term, and each person thinking about moonshots might think about it differently. My favorite and the definition we use at XLabs is that which, when achieved, changes the perception of what is possible. And I like to, the namesake, man going to the moon, the entire, the Kennedy theme has a lot to say about this, because when we went to the moon, we didn't just achieve space travel, but it suddenly opened up an entire new generation of how people thought about what was possible. The final frontier is now conquered.
Yeah.
And of course, there was massive economic repercussions, like 13 new industries were born and multi-billions of dollars were made. And these are all the things that come along with the moonshot. But really, the thing that gives me goosebumps is the entire slew of generations that grew up with the Space Odyssey and Star Trek and Star Wars as sort of their moral and cultural upbringing, right? And that's what a moonshot is. And I find it super interesting now, flashing a little into what's happening into the world today. In many ways, with the explosion of generative AI, we are very much on the brink of a moonshot coming into life.
Yeah.
Because it is changing the perception of what we're doing.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about that. I try to keep this to a half hour, so we'll get to it, because I have luckily we're friends now, because I have a lot of questions. I'll just ask some of them on my own if I have to. But let's learn a little bit about. I love to start. I'm a story theory nerd, and I just love the idea that we're all on our journey. And a lot of times, even we don't realize the journey we've been on until someone starts asking us questions, and then we kind of see it. So, could you take me back in time, which is not as far back as I would have to go, but back to when, because you're younger, when you were a kid. Like I'm always curious, what kind of kid were you? How did you grow up? What was your family like? And then what are your earliest memories of something kind of burning in your heart, something you wanted to do, some adventure you wanted to go on?
What a great question. I grew up in India many decades ago. And I grew up in a very open family, very open-minded, especially for an Indian family. Both my parents broke their own like traditional norms as well. And I think that really helped because I was in a setup that encouraged open thinking, that actually encouraged thought to begin with, forget open thinking, just thought of any kind. And we were always encouraged to be ourselves. And I have a kid now, so I have a lot of these conversations with my mom, and she assures us we were just amazing kids. We never, we never gave her a lot of trouble. And that's so interesting because you ask, in my head, I'm a rebel. I'm a contrarian. I'm fighting against the world. And I often like to think about how far do those roots go? And to hear my mom describe me as a kid that really never got into trouble, whereas some of my earliest memories were, for example, being shocked that when we would go shopping with my cousins when they visited, and this was, second grade, so probably like 6 years old, pretty young, I would say. And I was shocked that my cousins would just ask, I want this, Mama, I want that, I want this, I want that, and I would be like, that is so impolite. As a kid, it's almost like I had these norms of how to behave and what good behavior would look like. But at the same time, I also remember actually when I was 8 years old, for example, in third grade, I was already like, people would very much describe me as a leader, sort of ahead of the class. It was important to me to excel in everything, not just everything I do, but to excel in everything. And I think this too had a lot of, family influence. My mom was very much on the artistic side of things. She was very social. She was a singer, a dancer. My dad, who shared a lot of these characteristics actually, but was an engineer. So it was like this blend of both worlds. It wasn't enough for me to just excel in science and math, but it was important to me to be great at dancing and debate and really anything. So the atmosphere I was in, my school had a lot of competitions, for example, and I would participate in every single one of them. And I had to ace the science competition, the science exhibitions, and I had to ace the fashion shows. So I think that really helped.
Wow, that sounds, that could also get exhausting, right? If you have to be good at everything.
Yes, it is. And I think in many ways, I really hope we don't have a set reserve of energy. Part of me is also a yogi, and I like to think, we can just draw the energy from the universe. But if it's true that we have a set store of energy, I used a lot of those. I think pretty much by the time I was 30, 35, I was like, done, you're done.
Well, you definitely, from what I'm getting to know about you, some folks have a little bit of like, I don't know the right way to say it, but like a world changer almost virus that lives inside of them that they just like it just grows in them, and they can't not imagine a life where they aren't at least trying to make a big difference. And a lot of folks who don't have that, but they end up making a big difference just because they're true to themselves and they do their thing. But and I've already seen with you, I think the assumption I would have around you before we met was you're more of a scientist kind of person, and you obviously are. But I've also seen that you're a poet and an artist, and I can see all of that as grown-up Radhika. I can see the grown-up version of that little kid. So I'm curious, as as I guess maybe I would assume because you were a good student and all academia was pretty important to you even growing up. Do you remember processing through career path and like wanting to make a difference? And did you have a pretty linear line as a kid to get to what you wanted to study and know about? How did all that come about?
Wow, very interesting. Yes. I was one of those kids, like even as early as third grade, where everyone would describe as Radhika knows where she wants to be in 5 years.
Yeah.
Like she has a 5-year plan. She's headed there. And so I would say it was pretty linear for the most part till about high school, sort of the transformative years.
Yeah.
And I would say at 17, things just completely shifted. because what I realized was the path I wanted to go on. So essentially, I was very much drawn to understanding the mysteries of the universe, which is why I became a physicist. But a big part of me, the world-changing virus, was already telling me that it wasn't enough to just learn about the mysteries of the universe and discover new things, but to bring it into the hands of people, like make it practical so people can experience these mysteries, like, combination of discovery and invention, if you will.
Yeah.
And at 17, I realized that I really wanted to do research. But in India, India has great engineering schools, like some of the world's best, like IIT, for example. But you're not exposed to research right away. In order for me to get my hands on actual research, I would have had to finish my undergrad, my master's, and then if you're lucky, you get to actually do research. And it just so happened, this is growing up in the 90s. So thankfully we had the internet. I'm Googling, okay, Google didn't exist. I am AOLing around.
Okay, yeah.
and I realized that, oh my goodness, in the US, kids are exposed to research during the undergrad, the REU program.
Yeah.
And, that just opened up an entire world for me. I was sort of, economically speaking, my family was well off, but we were, upper middle class in India, I would say. So it was not out of the question for me, and probably even expected that I would go to the US for my master's because, there's scholarships you would pay, you get paid for. And I come from a family, like most Indian families, where education was really important. So, you're pursuing that line.
Yeah.
But it was out of the question for me to go to the US as an undergrad.
Yeah.
The international fees are, ridiculous compared to Indian money. And more importantly, I did not know a single person in the entire country. So something started happening there. And I think that age when I was 17 was so formative for me. And I just had this calling, calling is even too concrete a term.
Yeah.
I knew I had to go to the US. And the world just opened up, it happened. So at 17, I landed in the country. I went to undergrad at Purdue.
Wow. So had you visited the US before?
No, I had never visited the US. My mom had visited the US when I was in 8th grade. She was actually an ambassador, a cultural ambassador for Rotary Club. And so she had visited many of the cities, New York, Boston, places in California. And she would send me these photos and she brought back, toys. She described what it was like. And I thought it was really cool. Again, a place I knew I was headed. And I really identified, my family still jokes. And, my mom is convinced that I was just born in the wrong country.
Yeah.
So in many ways.
Got some American in it. Yeah. Well,
very much.
I mean, I've been on Purdue's campus. It's not New York or LA. It's
oh my goodness.
It's Indiana. So, and it's a college town. It's cool, but it's not a huge city. So, and you're a very smart person. I'm sure you thought of this before you got here. But did you feel like you were in America when you landed at Purdue, or did it feel like something else?
Oh, you hit on a very important moment in my life, really. Yeah. You see, I was so focused on finding the best university for research. At that point, I wanted to do astrophysics, learn the mysteries of the universe, but also double major in aeronautical engineering, the sort of like, the practical, the engineering aspect. So I only focused on schools that were good at both. You see, Purdue has had one of the most number of astronauts. It has a fantastic aeronautical program. And it's really good in physics too. So I was focused so much, and of course, affordability, the Ivy Leagues, I didn't even apply to a single Ivy League. It was completely out of the question. So I focused on the sort of range of, schools that were good only in academics, completely forgot everything else about the weather, the scene. I come from Chennai, which, when I left back in 2000, had about 25 million people. So huge cities, the 4th biggest city in India. I don't even know what the numbers are today.
Wow,
so
I didn't know
from
that.
there,
so that's like New York. That's huge. Yeah.
It's huge. And I landed in West Lafayette, Purdue.
Sure.
And I was shocked because my only exposure to America, for the most part, culturally speaking, was the show Friends. grew up on Friends.
Yeah.
And imagine my surprise when there are no skyscrapers. Like, where's my coffee shop? Like, where are these people?
Yeah.
It was a brutal shock.
Okay.
I also come from a place where there's no snow. And of course I didn't Google. I mean, I didn't,
Yeah.
search for the weather. Didn't know anything about the weather. So I landed in a t-shirt on December 28th, 2000, 5 feet of snow, one of the worst winters in
Wow.
Indiana. So it was a very rude, welcome to your new life.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, it's a great. I love it because I used to produce some movies back in the day. I've had several lives my own self, but some of the scenes. Sometimes when people see a story, you can just see that movie scene. You know what I mean? It's so vivid. So that's all your surroundings. How was it socially? Were you pretty quickly able to like make friends and fit in, or no?
Oh, that was the other thing. I forgot. 25 million. And I mean, in India, it's hard to even find private space. You cannot think without being surrounded by 5 people touching some part of your body, right? Whereas I come to Purdue, it's December 28th, which means 3 days after Christmas.
Nobody's there.
So it's winter break. It's winter break in Indiana, in a college town. There's no one around. And it was one of the rudest shocks of my life. So I walked around campus when there's no one. All the buildings are shut. And it wasn't until Jan 8th, almost 12 days later, when campus opened and the secretaries and some of the professors were floating back in. And so I knew, again, it was like a girl on a mission. The part I left was, I mentioned the part that I come from, upper middle class. But my mom, who was, has always been one of my biggest cheerleaders, supporters, a guide, she basically super encouraged this journey. I feel like if I weren't from that family, for a girl at 17 years old, 20 years before our current time, to just go to the United States without knowing anybody is I think unheard of even today in India for the most part. Yeah. And she basically said, well, here is $1,000 check. So, with that t-shirt and the snow and lack of a friend's atmosphere, all I had with me was $1,000 check. And she said, I'll always be there, moral support wise, but don't ping me for more money. This is what I would have spent on you for your education in India, and that's what you get.
Wow.
And I gave her, speaking about American, I gave her one of the most riveting speeches in my life. I told her, Mom, America is the land of opportunity. We can make anything work there. It was like the classic American dream happening to an immigrant outside of America. And it did. I mean, it was full of naivety and hope, but in a really good way.
Yeah.
And, I cannot complain about it because here I am, I made it work.
You did. Yeah, you
did. I did. I didn't think about it as fitting in or making friends, to answer your question. I had a mission. I had to find a scholarship. I had to find a job. I had to figure out rent, tuition, all of that stuff. So, and get a degree and do research, the main reason I came for. So I was just kind of gun-ho making it work. And in my experience, that keeps happening to me somehow. I have these draws.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, the world shows up with the right people. And they may not seem like it, but in my experience, big or small, the right opportunities, it opens up.
It's, I found that people, it's like a yin yang or chicken and egg or something, but the people that think that way, that happens to, if you know what I mean? Like it's something about believing that. I don't manifest is a weird word, but something about believing it sort of opens your eyes to looking for that and seeing it as you go. Yeah. Well, I could talk forever, but we got to get to your actual career. So I'm curious, I'm sure we'll skip a bunch of stuff when I say this, but what ultimately got you into AI and interested you in that? And if there were any, I'd be interested if there were any sort of barriers, whether it was cultural or whatever that stood in your way, but why were you interested in that, and how did that come about?
Yeah. Long story short, I take a lot of mini retirements, like between every big move. So I'd finished my PhD in quantum computing. And I then joined Shell because I was kind of poached for the skills I'd built during my optical quantum computing career.
Yeah.
But I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I was also sort of moonlighting as a COO of a company, a data analytics company that had started. So 2 years after my career into Shell, I was a corporate VC, actually started the venture capital group. I had this moment where I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, do some world-changing stuff with all the talents I have. The sort of using the talents that I'm given has also been a theme in my life as I was reflecting on some of the questions you had sent in preparation. And so I did a mini retirement. We basically, my now husband, then fiance, and I left on a camping trip across the country for 6 months. And we're just staying in all these national parks, whatever. And I realized that I wanted to move to Silicon Valley and become an entrepreneur. And I wasn't sure in what, but I knew that the answer would sort of come to me. And it didn't. It really didn't. At that point, I had these, I always like to keep in touch during these sort of mini sabbaticals, if you will, but like to keep in touch. And I was an advisor for a quantum computing company. And they said, hey, why don't you come on over and meet the team, spend some time in Canada where they were based, and be our CEO. And I said, all right, it wasn't the path I thought I would be on, but let's do it. But jet lagged en route to Canada, I woke up with what felt like this needs to be my life mission. I had a vision of an AI algorithm that would help figure out massive instabilities in the world, like predict societies, if you will. Mm-hmm. And it's lucky, my husband is sleeping right next to me, so I wake him up. He would then go on to be my CTO. And I said, this is what we're going to do. And for 12 hours straight, we're in the guest house of one of my best friends. We spent 12 hours and they're bringing us coffee because they could tell something massive was happening. It was amazing. We covered the entire walls with, paper, brainstormed, and that would become Selden, my first AI startup. So I always like to think that, I didn't pursue AI. For me, AI has always been a way, a tool, one of the techniques, something you use, a sword to slay the dragon versus, I need to learn how to wield this tool. It just so happened that AI was the way to do it. And, we went on to predict great things like, for example, the rise of ISIS.
Wow. That's really impressive. And at some point along the way, you're helping cure cancer as well. That was after that then, the cancer.
That was after that. That was after that, yes. Yes, but you asked about like the cultural, like, did it ever, I never thought of it that way. Like, being in technology and physics in India, I was one of 4 girls in a class of 50, the group that studied computer science. So I've always been, and same thing with the physics honors program at Purdue, very few number of women, but it's never stopped me. I never thought anything of it until I came to Silicon Valley. And I think the entire culture, one of these is not like the others, slowly became very evident. And I like to live in, I think any good CEO and founder spends a lot of time in the world they want to create, almost like a fantasy world. They have to be there. You got to draw from there to create and bring it to reality. Yeah. And I think I spent so long in this world where I refused to see the biases, refused to, the cultural archetypes or whatever people expect and how I didn't fit. I think that might have hurt me, honestly.
Yeah. Well, yes, I'm sure that was difficult, but I'm also sure it shaped you to be who you are. And I can't help but, so part of why I wanted you to speak at our event, Human Intelligence, was intuiting from the things I saw of you online and your agent doing an amazing job of selling you. It wasn't a hard sell, but I wanted us to address artificial intelligence with someone that had some sort of history of believing it could be used for good and using it for good. And that seems like very consistent. From a young girl, you wanted that. And, there's a small example in my own life. This is nothing like what you've gone through, I'm sure, in the last couple of years. But I was way into this thing called the Enneagram 20 years ago, which is sort of like a Mystic Myers-Briggs. I don't know if you're familiar with it at all, but it's 2,000 years old. And it was like my party trick that I could talk about that nobody had ever heard of. And then like 3 years ago, every major corporation in the world was using it. And people would ask me, hey, have you heard about the Enneagram? I'm like, that's my thing. So that's just like 0.1% of what you've gone through. But my assumption is in your life, we all knew AI was coming, and we've seen science fiction movies, and we knew that we probably sort of knew maybe AI is involved with Google or something like, but in the last 12 months, it has definitely like crossed the sort of the roller coaster hill, right? For people that aren't in that world, knowing it's a big deal. And it feels like it happened really fast from folks like me who weren't in the middle of it. First of all, I have to assume there has to be some frustration in all these sudden AI experts that have just emerged. But what I would love to hear, and you talked about this some of your talk, so people can hear that, but as we are in this world where it's now a popular, it has reached a level where normal people, for lack of a better word, are using it. I'm going to quit talking now and let you talk. Can you talk about how your passion to use it for good permeates, and what do you want to tell people like me that are just messing around with ChatGPT and all this kind of stuff?
Yeah. To me, that's been such a strong driver, this using technology for good. At a very young age, I remember in ninth grade, I was in a debate, and it was one of the debates and talking about failures. It was a debate where I lost. And you have to, going into the psyche of ninth grade Radhika, there isn't a lot of things she loses. And I did a fantastic job. Like, at one point I had the audience close their eyes and imagine this world. And the topic of the debate was, is technology evil or good? And I chose the side of technology is one of the biggest uplifters of humans. It is almost, one of three big ways where we can ascend our consciousness. And I was so, if you look at the history, from agriculture, pottery, printing press, genetic engineering, nuclear energy, all the way through, we've always, it has uplifted society in many ways. And of course, there are many problems that each of these revolutions create, but somehow we figure it out. And for the most part, we're better. That's been my worldview. Now, ninth grade, this debate, and of course I picked the side that, technology is good, and it's not inherently, actually the point was a little more subtle. It's not inherently good or evil. I argue that it's in the hands of the people. Yeah. How you use it. Yeah. And, an example that I used was a knife, and you can use it to cut an apple and sow your seeds, reap the harvest, blah, blah, blah. Or you can use it to kill a person. Yeah. And the other side won. And this kind of blew my mind. Yeah. And I think it was one of those moments, I think I learn a lot from our failures. I think we all do, because we obsess over them so much. So it almost became my life mission that, one, bring these technologies into the world and show people that you can use it for good. So when, so I have been in AI, as you said, for quite a while. And, many of my talks, and it is also why public speaking and sharing this knowledge is important to me. So I was doing that for a while. And it always felt like, we were in this ivory tower or building, like we were magicians underground creating this thing. And I would come and, give them a glimpse and talk about look at this powerful brew I'm brewing. Yeah. But now, like you said, to me, it's one of the best things about this AI explosion, because the biggest new programming language out there now is English or Chinese or Mandarin or French or Hindi. It's your language, which is amazing. So what I noticed about this generative AI explosion is some of the big experts who are talking about it and using about it are non-AI folks. because the
Yeah.
AI folks are still kind of reeling in on what's really happening. Do we understand this? What is the right way to use this? Or just focused on deploying, like scale, scale, scale.
Yeah.
Whereas, so the people who are coming as the new AI experts are people who are just using it and flying with it. And to me, that's actually a good thing. Yes, it does feel like, oh, what is this? Wait, how are you talking about AI?
Yeah.
Yes, there is certainly that. But I think it's one of the best things is now it's no longer, where I'm at a party and talking about, or at Christmas and talking with my family about AI. And they're like, now they're the ones sending me. Have you seen what I can do? So I
Right.
think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think that is fantastic. And my, what is the right word? My urge, my plea, my sort of big, welcome, come join this party to everyone listening and to you, Joe, would be how can we use AI for good?
Yeah.
I did this at the keynote, but I would encourage all of us to, or everyone listening to join and take this oath with me. I wish more AI folks would take it. Where, on stage at your event, I stood up and took a live oath that no matter how I use AI, I will think about the larger consequences and use AI only for good.
Yeah.
And I say this because many people who are using AI, with the images and creating content out there and, imitating styles or just getting inspired by styles, they're not thinking about the larger consequences, like the image of the Pope in the puffer jacket that went viral. The guy who created it was just having fun.
Right. Yeah.
So, I think we're stepping into a new world. Misinformation, deep fakes, massive consequences about fake realities, manipulation of people and data. These are all real concerns, and they're happening at a pace that is unprecedented. We really haven't seen this. We throw around these words a lot, but ChatGPT has had the largest, quickest gathering of users than any technology ever seen in the history of mankind. Anything before, faster than Instagram, Facebook, printing press, anything. So this is real.
It's real, and
So,
we don't usually get the opportunity. Not everybody gets the opportunity to live in an age where something like that's happening, and
absolutely.
so it's kind of overwhelming, to us. And we see the most your oath, your keynote was very meaningful to me. What gave me the most hope was you had a little simple sort of exponential chart of kind of human advancement, I guess. I don't know what you called it. And seeing in the last even 50 to 100 years, the things we have created as human beings that could have very easily destroyed us,
Yes.
nuclear energy or whatever. And that all those things were used for bad, but we, on the whole, found some ways to self-regulate and to control the power of them enough as a whole to see the good come out of it. And so that actually gave me a lot of hope for AI, because I think all of us can get a little kind of freaked out about it. And I do have one question. I hate it when people ask questions that they could ask Google. Like that's a frustration of mine. But I did ask this question to Google, and I'm still a little confused. What does generative mean when we say generative AI compared to what you've done in your work? How do you explain that?
Oh, that's a wonderful question.
Yeah.
Yes. So basically, I would like to think of it as the mental model for AI has changed. So in the past, we think of them as prediction machines. Because, they find these underlying patterns. And the truth is, if you look at the technology for generative AI, that is still true. Like, yes, they're using some kind of pattern identification to figure out, patterns in language. But more importantly, the best way to think of them is that they're mimicking human language. So they're generating language, they're generating words,
Gotcha.
they're coming up with, they're generating images. And they're doing this with very little prompting because they've almost developed a theory of mind. And if you look at research, they have. And theory of mind is how humans simulate how the other person is going to behave. So, right now I'm thinking, oh, what is Joe going to ask me? What is he looking for in this answer? Is this answer, or what would be most useful to the listeners? And so we have an ability to simulate what the other person is thinking or what they want. And we're able to generate responses. And, some of it, depending on the person, is based in truth. Some of it is a little bit of fantasy. And then what the context is very much dependent on the circumstances. Is it business? Is it personal? Is it talking to a friend or a lover? AI now is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Should I generate this image in the style of Dolly? Should I generate this image in the style of a virtual cartoon? Should I give an answer on what AI is in the style of an epic battle rap or epic rap battle, right? So AI is doing that, and that's what makes it generative. It is almost like your autocorrect or your autofiller, on steroids.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Now I learned something
I
very
hope that
practical.
was more useful than Google.
Yes, it was. It was great. Ironically, I should have asked ChatGPT instead of Google. Maybe it would have been easier. Who knows? But you were the best answer. But not everybody
thank you.
gets this opportunity.
Well, I'll tell you the biggest difference between ChatGPT and me. ChatGPT will give you an answer that is very plausible, very confident, but not always real. Because it is generating these words based on the probability of it sounding good and sounding true, but also drawing your interest. Whereas, someone like me, I would love to say something, completely out of the blue and not true, but I wouldn't do it, even though it might draw your attention, keep us talking more, make it go viral. I just wouldn't do it. So that is one of the biggest differences between ChatGPT and me.
And you're more fun, in my opinion. So thanks for.
Thank you.
We're out of time. I'm so sad. I could ask you a million more questions. You are on our platform. We did get some backstage interview questions with you at our event that'll show up on LeaderCast 365 for the folks that are part of our subscription service. You can hear a lot more from Radhika there. And we're gonna stay in touch and find ways to try to make the world a better place together. So I'm super excited.
Thank you.
Super excited.
Thank you. And I'll have a link for the pledge if any of you are moved to sign that with me. And, it's in the works. I'll share it with Joe and he can put it up on
We'll put it under this podcast, whether you're watching or listening. We'll put that link there for everyone.
So join me. And thank you, Joe, for having me. It was such a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.